What if I told you that the most humble hedge knight in Westeros history might have bloodlines connecting him to the North's most legendary house, and that this connection could rewrite everything we thought we knew about honor, destiny, and why Starks are so ridiculously tall? Duncan the Tall isn't just some random 7-foot giant wandering around Westeros. There's a reason his descendants end up tied to Winterfell, and the truth is wilder than any dragon theory you've ever heard. Before we dive into this genealogical rabbit hole that makes royal family trees look simple, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because Westeros' throne is about to connect dots that'll make you rethink the entire foundation of House Stark and House Targaryen. Let's start with the elephant in the room, or should I say, the giant. Duncan the Tall is absurdly tall, standing somewhere around 7 feet, which even in a fantasy world full of dragons and ice zombies is notably exceptional. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Starks, particularly certain branches of the family, have a tendency to produce unusually tall individuals. Coincidence? In George R.R. Martin's world, coincidences are about as common as happy endings at weddings, which is to say they don't exist. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The real story here isn't just about height. It's about blood, duty, and how a hedge knight's legacy ends up flowing through the veins of the most honorable house in Westeros. And trust me, when you see how this all connects, you'll understand why the Starks and Dunk share more than just an appreciation for doing the right thing, even when it's catastrophically inconvenient. Here's what we know for absolute certain. Dunk has descendants. This isn't speculation or fan theory. George R.R. Martin himself has confirmed that Duncan the Tall's bloodline continues into the main Game of Thrones timeline. Now, Martin being Martin, he hasn't just come out and drawn us a family tree with big red arrows. No, that would be too easy. Instead, he's dropped hints like breadcrumbs, and those breadcrumbs lead straight to Winterfell. The most compelling evidence comes from examining the physical characteristics of certain characters. Brienne of Tarth, who's directly descended from Dunk through his son or grandson who married in a House Tarth, shares his extraordinary height and, more importantly, his unshakable commitment to honor and knightly ideals. But Brienne's not the only tall, honor-obsessed character running around Westeros. The Starks have been producing remarkably tall individuals with an almost pathological commitment to duty and honor for generations. Starting to see the pattern? Now let's talk about Hodder, because this is where things get absolutely insane. Hodder, or Wylus as he was originally named, stands at an absolutely massive height, easily matching or exceeding Dunk's legendary stature. And who does Hodder serve? House Stark. Who are his ancestors? Great question, and one that Martin has been suspiciously quiet about. But here's the kicker. Hodder's not nobility. He's not a knight. He's descended from likely stable hands or household servants at Winterfell. Sound familiar? That's exactly the kind of position Dunk might have ended up in if he'd settled down in the north. The timeline actually works perfectly if you map it out. Dunk lives during the reign of Aegon the Unlikely, roughly 80 to 90 years before the events of Game of Thrones. That's 3 to 4 generations, which is exactly the right amount of time for Dunk's bloodline to spread through northern houses, particularly through marriages between knights and northern families, or through more, let's say, informal connections that absolutely happened in medieval societies. But here's where it gets really juicy. Old Nan, Hodder's great-grandmother, tells stories about knights and legends with a level of detail and passion that suggests personal connection. She knows things about Duncan the Tall that wouldn't be common knowledge for a simple servant. She tells Bran stories about Ser Duncan fighting attorneys, about his adventures with a Targaryen prince, about his honor and courage. How would an old northern servant woman know these specific details about a hedge knight from the south, unless there was a family connection? The thematic parallels are impossible to ignore. Dunk's defining characteristic is his honor despite his low-born status. The Stark's defining characteristic is honor despite it constantly getting them killed. Dunk protects Egg with his life. The Starks protect their own with religious devotion. Dunk stands up for the powerless even when it puts him in danger. The Starks fight for justice even when justice means destruction. These aren't just similar values. These are identical philosophical frameworks for understanding duty and honor. Let's also consider the geographic possibilities. We know Dunk travels extensively throughout Westeros. We know he eventually becomes a member of the Kingsguard under Aegon the Unlikely. But before that, there are decades of adventures we haven't seen. Decades where Dunk could have traveled north, could have spent time at Winterfell, could have formed connections with northern houses. And given Dunk's tendency to help people and then accidentally create lifelong bonds, it's entirely plausible he left more than just memories behind. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The North values different things than the South. Southern nobility obsesses over bloodlines, titles, and legitimacy. The North cares about honor, strength, and whether you can survive winter. A giant of a man who embodies honor and protects the weak? That's Northern nobility material right there, regardless of whether he's got a fancy surname. Dunk would have been respected in the North in ways he never was in the South. The genetic evidence, if we can call it that in a fantasy context, is compelling. Dunk's height is genetic, clearly, since his descendants like Brienne inherited. The Stark tendency toward height appears randomly, but consistently through their line. But it's not just the main Stark family. Various cadet branches, household knights, and northern families show this trait. It's almost like somewhere along the line, an exceptionally tall individual with incredibly strong genes introduced this characteristic into the northern gene pool. Now, Martin loves his historical parallels, and in real medieval history, knights absolutely fathered children with common women, and those children often remained in service to the houses where they were born. It wasn't scandalous. It was just life. A knight passes through, romances a serving girl or a merchant's daughter, moves on to his next adventure, and 9 months later, there's a baby with suspiciously knightly features growing up in that household. Repeat this over generations, and you've got an entire bloodline as symbolic connection is even more powerful than the genetic one. Dunk represents the ideal of true knighthood stripped of politics and ambition. The Starks represent the ideal of true nobility stripped of southern corruption and game playing. Both are constantly punished by the world for maintaining their principles. Both refuse to compromise their values, even when compromise would save them. Both protect the weak, defend the innocent, and stand against injustice regardless of personal cost. That's not coincidence. That's legacy. Thanks for watching Westeros Throne, and remember, in Westeros, blood always tells, even when it's telling stories nobody expected to hear. Here is what this victory means for other creators who are watching this case. Artists who have seen their visual styles copied by AI image generators now have hope that copyright law might protect them. Musicians worried about AI cloning their sound have a precedent to point to. Screenwriters, photographers, designers, and every other type of creative professional can look at this ruling and think, maybe the legal system will actually protect our work after all. This is not just about books. This is about establishing that creativity has value and that value cannot be appropriated without consent. Now let's talk about the timeline, because legal battles like this do not happen overnight. The motion to dismiss being denied is a first battle victory, but the war is far from over. Discovery is going to take months, possibly over a year. There will be motions, counter-motions, depositions, expert witnesses, and enough legal maneuvering to make a Littlefinger scheme look simple. Eventually, if neither side backs down, this will go to trial, and that trial could take weeks or months. Then there will